This is the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. It's Thursday, January 30th, 2025. It is 8:31 a.m. And we'll begin with a roll call of members. Mary Hartman,
Here.
Mike Lawson,
Here.
Rich Feely,
Here.
Linda Escobedo,
Present.
and Keith Bogman present. All right, so we have five of us here. Town Manager Carrie LaFleur is not able to attend. She actually has a staff meeting that will be taking place at any moment. And it also had invited our new Community Development Director, Elisa Sandoval, she'll be at that same staff meeting, but she will be attending our trust meetings in the future, beginning at our next regular meeting on February 11th. So I'm going to welcome, I'll say a welcome back to Concord, Shelley Gehring from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. Shelley met with the Affordable Housing Trust Study Committee back in 2019 when we were just getting established, and we were drafting a bylaw, which we brought to town meeting in 2020. But Shelley, as I told the Housing Roundtable, community preservation committees have a coalition, and Municipal Affordable Housing Trust in Massachusetts largely have MHP. So we're happy to have that as a support network. Whenever there's a new housing trust that gets established, Shelley is the person that comes and meets with them and talks to them about their duties. So, I'm grateful for the technical assistance that MHP has awarded us, and the purpose of this meeting is to have Shelley walk us through review the technical assistance award, determine the scope of work, and establish a general timeline to our working together. So with that, and I would welcome back to Concord, Shelley, and please walk us through it.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for taking this time, and it's really nice to be with you. I'm really wanting to use this time to start shaping our work together over the next several months, and so that I can fully understand some of your expectations for the effort. And so we are committed to be supporting you into the fall, so about 10 months. And the work really is, we see the trust really as our client, but we know, of course, that you're engaged with other organizations and that that's vital to building the capacity of Concord to support affordable housing. And this effort does include a few other organizations. I'd like to have a conversation with you about how you imagine this work to unfold. How often are you expecting it to be where there's a small subcommittee that brings it back to the large group? Is it all large group conversation? Is it like how often are you anticipating meeting? But if we can just kind of have a conversation about how you imagine this work happening, so that we can start considering a timeline as we go.
Thanks, Shelley. I had a specific suggestion, and it actually comes from watching the MHP webinar with, I think it was last year's award recipients, and I noted in the case of the town of Amherst that they were doing a similar thing with a facilitated process, and they started off with an in-person meeting, which sort of served as an icebreaker and an opportunity for people to get to know each other. We meet, just as a general background, the housing groups meet quarterly as the Concord Housing Roundtable for typically an evening or late afternoon meeting where we each report out on what we're doing. So we do sort of know each other, but I think that the scope, as Rich Feely and I had envisioned in drafting the application, would include not only our housing roundtable partners, which are the Housing Authority, Housing Development Corporation, Housing Foundation, the Select Board, Planning Board, Community Preservation Committee. Not only them, but there are other boards in town that deal with the development process that we're not really linked into, and we might want to expand it to include them. Our focus is housing development, and some of the issues would typically involve the Zoning Board of Appeals, maybe the Board of Health, maybe Public Works Commission, and others who it would be helpful for us to have, to take the opportunity to see how things go. Um, so that was one thought, and then it would be, and then we're mindful that there's two uh, specific tasks that we've identified in undertaking this. One is to develop to get a fresh consensus on what the on how we choose the priorities for our limited funding. And that we would like to have uh, we're looking at things like uh, that, that we could educate. Oh, and two other groups failed to mention and should have: the public, because these meetings are public and many community members are interested.
Mhm.
And I think specifically the development community, that I have to say, as a trust, we've done little outreach to the development community. That I know town staff is far more in touch with local developers than we've been. And when we talk about undertaking, trying to promote housing, whether it's through our funding or in what measures, regulatory measures we support, it'd be important to get a real world um, perspective from, involving the development community too, I think. What we're hoping to do is educate Concord on housing development economics, the costs of different kinds of units with and without free land. And by the way, the town is undertaking a very comprehensive process uh, on looking at all available property, town-owned, which could be surplus. They're looking very much at what the needs of not only housing, but other uses are. Um, so in some cases, there may or may not be free land involved.
Mhm.
We're looking at a target. I mean, we're concerned um, with income levels between 50% and 150%. And it would be helpful for us to focus on how do those translate to what those households can purchase or rent. And then to produce a methodology that would show what the local per unit subsidy would be for different strategies. And it would it would be and that would look at not only what the contribution is from the trust, but we've been asked to use as our unit as our standard of measure what's the what's the total local contribution, since we have Community Preservation Committee, we have the trust, we have town meeting directly sometimes, Concord Housing Foundation, and other local funding sources. So it's important for us to be able to say and point to what's the per unit cost. And I think in general, and I take this from something that I learned from MHP, and I've known Laura Schufelt for a long time
Mhm.
at MHP. She was in Falmouth when I was in Provincetown, And I happened to see Laura at a recent event, and she said it's important to crunch the numbers, and if the numbers don't make sense, maybe you don't do the project. And that just hit me like a lightning bolt. And I thought, wow, imagine that, crunching the numbers and seeing if it works before we proceed. And so I'd like to have, and I think we should have a level, that level of review of crunching the numbers. That's a skill set that we need to make sure that we're employing in when we make decisions. The other issue generally that flows is we could use this as an opportunity, this technical assistance as an opportunity to look at the strengths of each of our housing partners. The CHDC is a nonprofit. It can acquire land and own land. The Housing Foundation is a nonprofit which does fundraising. The trust has its statutory authorities, and the town has its authorities as well. To look at this, and we importantly, we are all supported by the Regional Housing Services Office, who we've been getting services from for many, many years. And so when we look at we ought to take a look at what skill sets collectively do our housing organizations need in order to be effective. For example, if in my experience on Nantucket, for example, is the housing trust there, which has much more money than has $70 million instead of the five that we have here. They the nonprofit development arm that they have available to them to receive funds, it has many full-time staff that they own, they're into property management and whatever. The Housing Authority is, which I should mention, the Housing Authority has established a nonprofit arm called the CHA, Local Properties LLC, so that there's all sorts of skill sets that are available from the town, from RHSO, from our various entities, and we ought to take a look at how best to, I would say, strengthen collectively our ability to carry out what we'd like to do in developing affordable housing here. So if that meant a series of meetings, I don't once a month would be fine. Once every other month I think would be fine for the commitment that we have with MHP through September, did you say? But anyway, those are my thoughts. I've done too much talking and we'll be glad to hear from others.
Anyone else want to jump in on how you imagine this work
Rich?
to run?
Yeah, I think to me the most important thing I don't want to prejudge the outcome, but one of the outcomes I want is a table that says with and without free land, how much can people expect to pay or be able to pay, and how much do we have to subsidize at different income levels for, probably effectively 1 and 2 bedroom units, and how much does that vary by, standalone buildings versus garden apartments versus, large projects. Because ultimately, I think a lot of us think that we need to focus on workforce housing, quote unquote. But, we know that somebody who at 110% say of AMI can pay something, but how much is that? And then how much more does it take to create that unit or buy that unit? And then, we need to have a debate about how much we're going to do and where on that income spectrum we're going to focus our efforts. But that's the tangible outlook or output that I'm looking here. And then, obviously when we get something like a 40B where we can leverage something that's got a lot of private money in it, we'll look at that, with the table of full cost as a baseline. But that's what I'm looking for.
So when I talk to you, I'm going to use the generic you. So I don't want anyone to take offense if it isn't specifically you, but when you talk about prioritizing how to spend your money, are you talking specifically just the trust? Are you talking about the CPC? Are you talking about other town entities?
That's a great question. And I have to say, going into it, I was thinking it was the trust, but coming out of it, but actually the feedback we got at a recent um, housing roundtable was when I put up a chart which just showed what the subsidy was from the trust. And they said, well, wait a minute, something's missing here, that the town puts more than just trust money into it.
Mhm,
We put others.
mhm.
And let me say my hope would, well, I don't want to prejudge what an outcome would be, but at this point there and for the coming year anyway, the money, the housing funds are coming to the trust. Uh, and even from CPC, we're getting $740,000 from them this year, which
Is
we
that
would then.
10% or is that 10% or is that more than 10%?
No, that's almost it's 1.8 million total. So the 10% would be 180,000. So they're giving
Okay,
us substantially more than that.
more.
Uh,
Mhm,
and so and if we should be so lucky as to get a real estate transfer fee, that those monies would go directly to the trust. But I think I see us as stewards for the town, and that the things that we come up with as standards are meant to reflect not only how we feel about it, but importantly, how the whole town feels about it. Um, and since we'll be involving the select board, all of our housing partners, select board, uh, the CHDC, the Housing Authority, CPC, and others in this
mhm,
process, I think we could aspire to having a framework that we can all agree upon, should be the standard for how we choose which housing projects um, we pursue. Because in the short term, before we get an outside source like the transfer fee, everything basically goes back to town meeting. That it's, while a town meeting vote is not needed to appropriate for a particular project, town meeting does have to approve CPC money going to the trust, and there may be the occasional project. Uh, I'd predict that by the time Junction Village needs to come online, and if it needed a quick $5 million, that's going to be a borrowing authorization or something that might come through. Might even come through CPC funds, depending
mhm.
upon how that goes. So it would need a town meeting vote.
Yeah, I feel strongly it should be locally sourced funds. CPC, transfer fee if we get it, any town appropriations. We ought to be looking at that as one pot. In other words, what can the town out of its own resources invest in affordable housing?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
hopefully most of it will run through the trust, but there may be projects that don't. But we should still be looking at that with the same criteria.
Uh,
I
yeah,
can
Mary Hartman.
I give
Yeah.
it- I agree with that. I also like to add that we are getting ARPA money. We have some ARPA money appropriated. So there's many sources. And when we go to town meeting, I always find that we're in better shape if the more transparent we are. And so if we take the more holistic view as far as what is the total town contribution, I think we gain people's trust. I
Right.
just want to bring back bring us back to some other goal of this work that Keith brought up, which is to outline the roles and responsibilities of the various organizations. As someone who is new to this trust this year, it was kind of it, and even looking at it for years as a member of the select board, understanding the roles and responsibilities among our housing groups, I think would be helpful to bring people on board.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Linda,
yeah. In addition to the comments that have already been made, and I think it's great we're going to be looking at a framework, but I also want to, I'm also concerned that we don't get locked into a framework, because sometimes when a framework is spelled out, people are locked into it and opportunities are missed. So that's one concern I have.
thanks, Linda. Other comments? Mike, do you have any thoughts? You've been around here for, I don't want to say longer than anybody, but not yet.
Long enough, though. Yeah, my hope is it's as comprehensive as it can be. I echo Linda's remarks, and I think the more comprehensive we can be in the approach that we take, the more successful we will be, especially in making sure that all of the housing organizations are not necessarily united, but fully informed and part of the procedures and processes that we use going forward. So, thank you.
Yeah, and one of the built-in things that we have in our process is that we are the financial guidelines that we've adopted or we have in place now basically involves the trust maintaining and periodically updating a list of priority projects. So we look to the housing production plan to guide us. We have HPP priority projects. Just about anything we might do, we can, point to a specific strategy in that plan that we're pursuing. Sometimes it's a stretch, but more often than not, there's a property that's specifically listed there. MCI Concord is not listed in the HPP currently, and so we're looking to just put a placeholder at some point for whatever comes out of the reuse and redevelopment planning that the town is launching even as we speak. They're opening proposals for, I think, opening proposals for planning assistance, and so that's a great opportunity. And frankly, I think that process and some of the things that they're looking at and might provide us with some tools as well that we can bring to bear on making decisions on particular things.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Given the time of 8:54, and I want to be sensitive to your time, so I'm wanting to kind of tell you what I'm hearing, and to see if I'm on the right track. So what I'm trying to do is be realistic about our time together, that it's not 3 years, it's about 9 or 10 months. And when you're engaging so many different people on so many different boards, like, we need to be really realistic about how much we can accomplish. So what I think I'm hearing is that you're interested in having a little bit more education around just the cost of housing development and different styles of housing development, and a little bit about how financing works, because it sounds like you're interested in kind of getting to a sense of how much you should be subsidizing housing units, and if that differs based on the type of housing.
Yeah.
I will put out that differs a lot based on a lot of different variables. Different sites have different costs associated to them, whether it's can attach to sewer or not, and there's a lot of it, but there could be some general kind of sense of what a subsidy per unit might what might make sense for Concord. And we
Right,
definitely have,
and rental versus ownership too, that
yeah,
we're seeing, we
yeah,
aspire to ownership, but just
right.
my head spins when I see how much the ownership units cost to produce.
And we have communities that are willing to provide deeper subsidy for units that are more deeply affordable. So, there can certainly be an education component where it can help you start thinking about that a little bit more deeply, perhaps, and across different boards. Because I think that having the CPC also, like, it would be helpful, I think, for developers if your groups were kind of on the similar page about what you're offering, then they can kind of know what they can count on. Perhaps that might be helpful. So kind of an education piece that can then help you think more about how to target your resources and how much to contribute to different developments. You also put up you also have a second of to analyze with the various housing partners how best to organize and implement the town's affordable housing efforts. So like these are that's pretty big. It seems really big to me. And then including so many boards, which I think is really good and important work. But I'm trying to think about how we can, this kind of steps that we can take to really help move this conversation over the next several months and what that structure might be. And we can, I think I'm going to propose that I come in with a more thought out proposal at your February meeting. But just to throw out now, what I'm kind of thinking of is perhaps that I think every other month might be a little too much, but maybe we commit to 3 instead of just our quarterly, do it a little bit more. Well, it actually might follow along with the quarterly, but perhaps 3 with everyone. And then we have a smaller kind of planning group in between that helps to develop that and bring some of it to the trust so that the trust is the main kind of supporter. And others, of course, can come to the trust meeting, but the trust really support that. But that we kind of try to organize kind of maybe 3 of the larger ones and then really spend some time planning those to try to make them as efficient as possible to move your conversation along as much as we can in the next like 10 months, something like that. And I think that some of the planning needs to be like, how do we focus this so that we're not just talking or spinning wheels, but that we're really trying to help people learn a bit more and think through different options to try to move towards perhaps some decisions by toward the end of the year. Does that kind of make sense?
I get,
Mary?
yeah, I'll just say that, planning how we're going to present this material to the 3 roundtables, it's going to take a lot of time. I think, and I hear your point about including a lot of committees broadens it scope quite a bit. I think for me, the priority of this work is something like what Rich was outlining earlier. So it's more, how do we crunch the numbers? How do we frame them in a way that helps us understand how to optimize how we spend this money? So I guess right now I kind of want to hope we can focus on that work as opposed to how do we present? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so it would actually be really helpful to narrow it that much where the end goal is really specifically that the trust feels comfortable in so some of the crunching of numbers that's a little bit more of kind of some of what MAPC does and not so much what we have done, although we could support it. So we'll have to talk that out a little bit more, but
maybe
I'm hearing so many different things. And so like,
yeah,
I think
maybe
that
the way to
roles and
proceed.
responsibilities of boards is really important, but we can't do that with every board. Like that's something that
That's
we
true.
could
That's
do with the
right.
trust, but
Right.
we're not going to
And
do that
that's
with 20 different boards.
That's right.
and that's definitely a phase, if I could, if like a phase 2 thing. I think phase 1, which we might want to just zero in on, is the number crunching, or is helping us figure out a formula or a strategy for picking,
Mhm.
or for deciding how we spend our limited housing dollars, that there's a community education component that, for all of us. I haven't taken a, uh, a housing development number crunching since
Mhm.
1981, I think, when
Mhm.
I got a master's in city planning. And in fact, Ed Marchant was
Yeah,
was my
Instructor.
teacher
teacher.
at the
Yeah,
Kennedy School. So back in
yeah.
the day. So if we can, so if we could focus on that, I think that would accomplish a lot, and maybe focus on that in the short term. Mike?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize what Keith and Mary are both saying. I mean, Concord is, I don't know if you do know, but Concord has a bunch of land that's coming online immediately through MCI. There's another parcel of land that was a Star Met site, and another parcel of land that is a school that's going to not be necessary. And there's going to be a lot of demands and ideas about how this property should be used. And what's an imperative to me is that the housing group is as informed and as facile as we can be in holding our own uh,
Mhm.
against what is likely to be a lot of very professional developers. And so it's really incumbent upon us to have the skills, the numbers, the data about housing fits into these kind of developments, uh, especially in Concord when these opportunities for development are so immediate and transformative of the town. So to me, that's why what
Mhm.
Keith and Mary have said are so critically important.
And are you saying ideally that's not just the trust, it's also bringing these other boards along in
Well,
better
I think
understanding the economics?
no, I think it's the trust that needs to be the lead on this. We armed with information and data and analytical capabilities, we can then contend with the other boards and committees in town that will also be involved in this very comprehensive and long-term development set of projects. So I think it's us working with all the housing partnerships that need to be the driver, the unified driver of a voice for housing in our community.
And so do
Yeah.
you still think that doing this in the context of the larger, the roundtable makes sense?
Well, let me put it this way. When we meet, when the trust meets and there's money on the table, others show up. And we've done a lot, we do a lot of outreach constantly with the other housing groups. We all attend each other's meetings. So I think that if as Mike has said, if we are the center of the discussion, we just by virtue of how we operate, there will be other housing groups there because we'll make sure that they're part of the discussion as well. But the trust has, I think, become the lead entity largely because we have the money. Because the money comes to us, that we get everyone's attention. If we call a meeting and we're going to have a bunch, to talk about, uh, if we're the ones convening the meeting to talk about this stuff, others will be there because it's in our collective interest to be working together, I think.
So what I'm wondering is then, does it make sense at the initial time together to really do more intensive focus on the trust with this learning? And then perhaps it's the trust developing some ideas that then you take to the roundtable for a broader conversation. Does that
Yeah,
resonate with some of you?
I
Yes.
think that that's good because I would want to separate this project from our standard quarterly roundtable meetings, that it would be, we could do a deeper dive at the meetings that are convened for this project and then report out to the roundtable. But our deeper dive won't be just us alone, that we, it'll be a public meeting and that there will be other
Right.
people here, we'll hear other voices, but we're the lead entity that will keep it moving along.
Yeah, because to me, like the broader, it gets kind of squishy, whereas if it's trust, it's about the trust trying
It's,
to
it sounds
better define
squishy,
your
but
role, better.
yeah, it sounds squishy, but what it really is to make sure that the trust is not a rogue entity that is operating on its own. When I got into this back in uh, 2020 or 2021, there was sadly, there was an institutional avoidance of the select board on housing matters. There was a disconnect, communication. Do you really, I was asked, does the trust really need we have the authority to decide. Why do we have to check with the select board? And I was thinking, well, for 37 years as a town manager, it never occurred to me. I mean, the one lesson I learned is that you can't do anything in a town without making sure the select board is on board. And so
Mm, mm.
that's been my commitment to the select board to stay to for us to be, and Mary's here from the select board, the town manager's involved. We have a link, but we have a commitment that we're going to be operating with our authority, but in the best interest of the town as a whole and in
So I just meant
communication.
by squishy, I just meant
Yeah.
it sounds squishy, like that it seemed like it was outside the trust because it was so much bigger. And to me, it makes a lot of sense that it's really the trust driving this and it's the trust process that includes a lot of other stakeholders in the conversation.
Right. It's a trust. That's exactly it. The trust process invites others in, but it's a
Yeah.
trust process. Yeah. Mary?
Yeah.
Can I just make a suggestion? What I'm hearing going forward would be to involve the trust with the three other housing groups within Concord to do the core work and then present that to the broader housing community, if you will, at the round table and ask for input. But the core work would be done. The trust would be the lead, but inviting in the three
Mm,
other housing entities that Keith mentioned earlier.
mhm,
Yeah. And the
mhm.
CPC too.
And what I
So,
would propose is that there be and I've talked a little bit with Keith about this, that there be a subgroup that plans between the trust meetings, just so that we make sure that our time is really efficient at the broader meetings that other people are coming to as well. So if the trust could think about how to structure that or legally how that works,
yeah, we could set up a
having,
subcommittee on February 11th. We could set up a subcommittee, which would then post meetings that I know some of the bigger committees in town
I,
have set up subcommittees.
I'm confident in our end that we can be organized,
Yeah.
uh,
Mhm.
and inclusive, yet, contained enough that it's not going to be bureaucratic and get us involved in all kinds of stuff. That's not an issue. I think it make sure we're focused on the right things,
Mhm. Mhm.
I think is the critical element. We've worked very well with all of our housing partners,
Yes.
uh, over the last a couple of years, and planning funding with our regional housing officer has been, terrific in providing information for us. So I don't think we have an organizational issue, and I'm sure Keith
Okay.
can get
Mhm.
a subcommittee put together that's got the representation we need. We just need to focus on those critical elements that are going to make us powerful and effective as we move forward in Concord.
Okay.
And if we have to move the roles and the clarifying the roles and responsibilities to phase two, that's okay. I mean, I think I want to get the core work done right. And I understand we only have 10 months.
Yeah. Yes. We'll
Carleen.
focus on the money, focus on how to establish our financial priorities, and then phase two would take a look at, well, how do we need to strengthen our existing organizations to carry that out somehow? And the
Yeah.
one thing that I think of as we go through it, we'll have to see whose responsibility is it going to be to crunch numbers or to review numbers that we receive from applicants. Because right now, there's and I would say that I think we'll be able to we ought to identify what assistance the new community development director can play in that. She's committed to attending our meetings, and I've talked to her about this project, so that will be something that we can look at. I'm gonna it's 9/11. I see a hand from Carlin Reed, who's a finance committee member. So Carlin.
Good morning, Carlin Reed, a member of the Finance Committee, but I'm speaking on my behalf. Keith and Mary, what role, if any, do you envision the Finance Committee to have in this process? When we look at the overall needs and asks for the town, not just from housing, do we have a role in this?
Yeah, I would say that if you've got a liaison, is there a liaison from the finance committee? I believe.
Yes, it's Lois
assigned-
Wassoff.
Yeah,
Lois
so
Wassoff.
yeah, so that that would be an opportunity by attending our meetings and being plugged in and offering comment as issues come up, to be informed about what we're doing. We're happy to have that role played there. And if there's something more that the finance committee would like to get out of this process, I'd be glad to meet with with the full finance committee. I've briefed them a couple of times, but so anyway, Mike, your thoughts?
I think we should be careful here. The finance committee has a very specific responsibility in town. And if we, and this isn't it. I don't, it's fine to have the the liaison be there, but are we gonna make sure we have a planning committee liaison there? Are we gonna make sure we have other liaisons? I don't think the meetings are open, that's fine, but I don't think there should be defined roles for other committees in town. It's got nothing to do with the finance committee. I was on it for 6 years. I know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. But I think we should focus on our rubric and not try to broaden the participation of this committee, or we'll get too unwieldy and we won't get anything done.
Yeah, I guess my response to that would be, again, for my entire career of dealing with finance committees and select boards, you need funding for the trust from the Community Preservation Committee comes to the Finance Committee for a recommendation, and that's not insignificant. And that so to welcome their attendance and staying in touch is fine.
Yeah, no, I have no, of course not.
Yeah.
That's fine. I just don't want to see us start defining roles for non-housing entities. I mean, they have their own responsibilities, and that's why they have
Right.
liaisons to this committee and every other committee, so that they know what's going on, and when things come to town meeting, they're informed and can make a good judgment on behalf of the town.
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
I just want to second Mike on that. I think our job is to come forward and say, with this much money, we can get these units on land we own, or buy these units from a developer. And, it's less if we designate those units for higher AMI. But, that's what we have to come forward with. The maybe discussions about whether the town can any longer afford direct appropriations as opposed to CPC or transfer fee. But I want us to come forward and say, if you spend this kind of money, you get this kind of unit for this, family or household at this income level. That's what I hope to come out of this. And so I agree with Mike that, yes, we, certainly respect the finance committee, but we gotta do our homework first.
Right. Thanks, Rich, and thanks, Mike. Shelley, are you
So kind of lastly, for me to understand your
Yeah.
expectations, are your meetings typically virtual? How do the roundtable meetings work? In your application, you had suggested, and Keith, you brought up possibly in person to get it going. Like, what are your expectations around
Yeah, I think
meetings?
generally the trust meetings have been virtual. I think since the COVID, we've never had we've only once had a trust meeting that was in person. That although the housing roundtables are typically in hybrid meetings, that is an opportunity for us to actually sit at the table together.
Mhm.
But our standard is virtual. I think a kickoff which would be a hybrid, I think would be helpful to see if we can get some, enthusiasm for the process. So my hope would be that our kickoff meeting at least would be a hybrid, that we would
So
meet at the townhouse um, and have
So like potentially the March trust meeting would be at town hall,
yeah,
potentially.
yeah.
Mhm. Okay. And your meetings
Unless
are typically
are
this,
there other thoughts on whether we need a hybrid meeting or whether we should do it virtually or?
I'm fine with virtual.
I am too.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm happy to do virtual too. I got back from Emerson Hospital doing lab work in time to just sit down here uh, and that worked fine.
so why don't we say virtual now? And as we go through the process, if
Sure.
it feels like having kind of a in the like the fall, like a broader kind of community in person kind of thing, then maybe we keep that on the table. Like to
Yeah,
present
especially
kind of
maybe when
findings
we've
or
got
present.
Yep.
yeah, especially maybe when we've got something to report out to a broader group
Yeah.
and want to get input on. Yeah, maybe that's the point
Yeah.
at which we do that. Yeah, thank you.
And maybe there's some way to encourage feedback and like maybe that would be helpful toward the end.
And whether
Okay.
it's through this process or not, we will be having, quarterly roundtable meetings when hopefully we'll be in a room together to at least interact with our
Okay.
fellow groups. Yeah. I've been pleased. We get 4 out of 5 select board members at our roundtables, which is pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
In fact, yeah, we pick a date that they can come. Lesson 1. Liz Rust.
Hey, how are you? Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. I was just thinking about the roundtable, so I'm glad you brought that up. I thought that we should probably schedule the next one, and I don't know whether you want to pick a date around this initiative. It would be really the end of, you have town meeting coming up, and then of course there's, April activities that are going to be busy for everybody. So whether it, I was thinking like sort of later March.
Yeah, I'm thinking May perhaps for April is off limits, I'm told, because of the 250th anniversary of April 19th, 1775. Shot heard around the world. So
I was thinking before the public hearings, so the end of
duck and
March.
cover actually is my mantra for that week. So sometime in March. I mean May.
Oh, May. I was thinking that before the public hearings, so people could talk about town meeting. No, that's often been what the roundtable has offered.
Well,
in
town
the
meeting will be
community.
June 2nd. So we could
Oh, do that. Well, I was thinking before the public hearings, but maybe
Right.
not. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So if you want to do May, then that's fine too. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we just had a quarterly roundtable a week ago, so I'm thinking that unless I mean the convenient time would be April, but I think if that's off limits, I think we ought to push it to early May.
Okay. Good enough.
Okay,
Great.
so
Great.
it's 9:20. I want to be sensitive to your time.
Yeah.
I will be at your so you meet the second Tuesday typically of the month, right, at 5
Yeah,
p.m.
we'll
the trust?
Yeah, well, we don't we may end up having to actually set a standard date. But our next meeting is certainly February 11th
Oh, I
at
see.
5 p.m. Yeah.
Okay, so I have it on my calendar to be there, and I will write up kind of some notes and and make a little bit of a proposal of how we move forward for us to talk about a little bit more, and then to hopefully create a subcommittee and to really start digging into the work. We'll just assume at this point that we'll be virtual with the possibility of doing a fall kind of public engagement kind of presentation or conversation.
Right.
Does that sound okay?
Can someone just clarify one more time for me? The intention for the subcommittee is that it would be only trust members?
No, not necessarily. It's just whoever makes sense to do some planning so that the time at the trust meetings can be really efficient and focused.
Yeah, it's a
So
working
it'll
group.
be
A working group between the
trust
formal
meetings.
meeting, so that there's someone to stay in touch with Shelley about this. I, for one, would like to see representation from the CHDC and the Housing Authority.
Mhm.
We already have I mean, Rich is the president of the Housing Foundation, so he's here, but it's just, I think it's an important bridge building that we need to make sure we keep on doing.
I agree.
And the working group isn't doing work, it's helping to do some groundwork for the trust, but the trust is still the decision makers
Yeah,
on everything
right,
associated with the trust.
yeah,
So it's,
yeah, yes,
this
it
isn't
will be.
making decisions for the trust, it's just doing some of the
No,
work and the
it's just
planning.
helping to guide the project. It was very helpful,
Yeah.
for example, when we were doing MBTA community zoning, that there was a group that from which the trust was represented on, that could work with the planning board and the town planner to make sure that that project was headed to a happy conclusion.
Yeah.
So I think that would be good. So
Great.
our next, anything else you need from
I've
us?
got to drop off. Goodbye.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks,
Bye.
Mary.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see
Thank
you. Nice
you.
to meet you, Shelley.
Nice to meet you. I
Just,
have what I need.
okay, very good. So let's see. I'm going to ask for public comment before, because it's on the agenda before we adjourn. I did want to note, as we say, our next regular meeting is Tuesday, February 25th at 5 p.m. Also, I just want to put on your radar screen that the Magic Subregion of MAPC is meeting this Tuesday morning, February 4th at 9 a.m. on a project which our trust has been pushing to have MAPC and the Magic Subregion bring together all of the affordable housing trusts in our region, starting with the 13 towns in the Magic Subregion, so that we can share what we're doing, learn from each other, advocate for pro-housing policies, and MAPC is committing $53,000 to a project, or in their staff resources to work with us, to work with the Affordable Housing Trust in the Magic Subregion for this year. And so there will be a vote by Magic to proceed with that project on Tuesday morning, and I'll report back on how that goes. Yes, Mike.
I'm sorry for I have a meeting on the 11th. Is that?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, I thought you said the
Yes.
25th.
Yeah, our next trust meeting is February 11th at 5 p.m. Yeah, this Magic meeting is the town has its representatives to there, but that will be a decision will get made by the 13 Magic towns on proceeding with this.
Thank you.
And this is something that I talked to Shelley about, that maybe MHP could do it. MAPC is stepping up for the Magic Subregion, and hopefully it can be a model for others. And so I'm excited about that. We had 8 of the Magic towns together on a Zoom call last May. 8 of the affordable housing trusts in our region, and we wanted to keep that up. So, is there public comment?
Keith,
Yes, Stefan.
Stefan Bader, Concord Housing Authority. Quick comment. I was going to say including in the costs and in the full disclosure that Mary Hartman had talked about, I think even free land isn't really free in the sense that you may not be charged for it, but it's a cost to somebody somewhere, and that needs to be stated and not tried to gloss over, I think. That was really my only comment, and I'm certainly pleased with the trust being the lead on this and the other organizations following along as appropriate. But I think the trust is definitely the driver and the primary audience endorsing that. Thanks.
Thanks, Stefan. Liz, thanks. Liz Rust.
So I just wanted to mention, no one mentioned this in words, that part of underlining the costs, I think, is the different needs about the different kinds of housing, the extremely low income rental or the ownership. Because clearly the ownership is the most expensive. The 80% ownership units require the most subsidy. And so how is that going to stack up to the, 80% rentals in the private developments or something is going to, if you're just looking at the dollars, they're not going to stack up the same way. So part of the report or analysis, I think, has to talk about the needs and the gap and like that part of it also. And no one mentioned that part of it. So I just wanted to give that some voice.
Thanks, Liz. Anyone else? All right, so motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mike.
Second.
By Rich. We'll do a roll call vote. Mike,
Yes.
Rich,
Aye.
Linda,
Hi.
and Keith, aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, Shelley. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Liz.